As the world watched in horror, the tear in the sky began to grow, its edges pulsating with an eerie, unnatural glow. In every corner of the globe, governments scrambled to make sense of the inexplicable phenomenon, but no one had any answers. The rift, which had appeared without warning, defied all logic. It hovered above Earth's atmosphere, the crack in space itself sending ripples through the very fabric of reality. In Washington, D.C., military leaders convened in secrecy. The president's chief advisor, General Monica Hayes, stared up at the live feeds, the glowing rift reflecting in her tired eyes. "What in God's name is happening?" she muttered, more to herself than anyone else in the room. She knew their response had to be swift, yet no protocol existed for something like this. Nothing in the military manuals could have predicted a rift in space-time. Meanwhile, across the globe in Tokyo, Dr. Akira Tanaka, one of the world's leading astrophysicists, worked furiously at his computer. His fingers flew over the keyboard, his screen filled with algorithms and data that only made the situation more incomprehensible. He had been one of the first to identify the rift. Using satellite data from multiple space agencies, he had watched it grow from a pinprick of light to an immense tear in the sky. And now, the data pointed to something beyond his understanding. The rift was expanding at an exponential rate. As Dr. Tanaka scanned the readings, a cold shiver ran down his spine. The readings weren't just of energy, they were of something alive. Whatever had caused the rift wasn't just a natural anomaly. Someone, was pushing through it. The rift continued to glow brighter as days passed, like a cosmic wound, tearing deeper into the universe. Governments sent in reconnaissance drones, only to lose contact moments after the drones entered the rift's vicinity. Communication satellites malfunctioned. Some of the world's most advanced military systems malfunctioned, their communications garbled or completely severed. A strange hum, barely audible but felt deep within the bones, became a constant presence. It was everywhere. The hum of something not entirely human, not entirely anything Earth had ever known. The public grew restless. Rumors of strange occurrences began to surface. People claimed to hear whispers in their ears, see visions of far-off stars, or faces that weren't quite human. Some believed the rift was a divine sign, a calling from the heavens, while others feared the end of the world was drawing near. It wasn't long before the first reports of people vanishing began circulating. At first, it was a few individuals, mysteriously disappearing without a trace. But then it escalated. Entire families, entire neighborhoods. There were no signs of struggle, no clues left behind. The disappearances were inexplicable, and no one could connect the dots between them and the rift. Yet, one thing was clear to everyone who experienced it firsthand. The rift was not a mere anomaly. It was alive, and it was watching. Then, on the 15th day, it happened. The sky split open in a blinding flash of light. From the rift came the first of them, a humanoid figure, shimmering with an otherworldly glow. It stepped through with deliberate grace, as if the very air parted for it. It was not human, not fully. The being's skin appeared translucent, its veins coursing with star-like pulses of light, its eyes burning with an ancient intelligence. The entire world seemed to hold its breath, as the first words of contact, silent and overwhelming, began to echo in the minds of everyone witnessing the phenomenon. And then, in a single, united moment, the world knew one thing: humanity was no longer alone. The world stood still as the Riftborn, this being of light and energy, remained motionless, its presence overwhelming every human sense. The atmosphere itself seemed to bend around the figure, as though reality was momentarily unsure of itself. People everywhere, on television screens, in crowded streets, and alone in their homes, stared, transfixed by the sight. For some, it felt like a dream. For others, a nightmare. Then the first word came, not spoken aloud but felt deep in the mind: humanity. The voice was not a voice at all, but a rush of thoughts that seemed to flood the minds of every single person within range of the rift. It was as if the Riftborn communicated directly to their very consciousness. Panic rippled through the crowds, confusion spreading faster than wildfire. Who were they? Why had they come? Peace, the Riftborn's voice echoed within them again, though no one had heard it speak. We are not here to harm. But the message was met with a mixture of fear and awe. To the government leaders, this was a first contact scenario far beyond anything they had trained for. They rushed to assemble an emergency summit, but it was impossible to make sense of the Riftborn's cryptic emotional waves of thought. They didn't speak like humans. They didn't even think like humans. The feeling in their presence was of ancient wisdom, of a depth of knowledge that seemed incomprehensible, like hearing the deep hum of the universe itself. For a few brief moments, all seemed calm, as if the Riftborn were waiting, observing, giving humanity time to adjust. And yet, across the world, there was a growing unease. Governments, scrambling to understand the sudden appearance of these beings, began to question the Riftborn's intentions. Were they truly peaceful, or was this some kind of elaborate deception? Some speculated that the Riftborn were somehow connected to the strange disappearances that had plagued the world in recent days. A sinister possibility began to form. Were they extracting humans to fuel some unknown purpose? But as quickly as the Riftborn appeared, others followed. More rifts opened, one after another, and more of them emerged. Dozens, hundreds. As the rift expanded in the sky, more figures, each radiating with the same eerie glow, stepped through. Some were tall and regal, others appeared humanoid, but with subtle differences, like shimmering skin or ethereal wings. Their numbers seemed to grow with every passing day. The Riftborn were not alone. They were a collective, a people, a species, not just an isolated entity, and their presence began to reshape humanity's understanding of what was possible. A small group of scientists, led by Dr. Tanaka, were given unprecedented access to study the Riftborn. Using advanced technology and whatever minimal understanding they could grasp, they tried to communicate further. They learned that the Riftborn spoke not just through words, but through emotions, thoughts, and images that flowed directly into the mind. This method of communication bypassed traditional barriers, language, culture, even time. Dr. Tanaka spent countless hours in discussions with the Riftborn, struggling to break down their messages. He learned that they were not alien conquerors, but time travelers, originating from a humanity far beyond Earth's present. They were human, but not as the world knew it. They had evolved, mutated through time, transcending their biology. They were humanity's descendants, far future humans, sent back through the rift to correct something in Earth's timeline. The realization struck like a thunderclap. The Riftborn were not here to conquer Earth. They were here to save it. Yet their presence raised far more questions than it answered. Why had they come back? What was the future that had driven them to tear open the fabric of space-time itself? And more importantly, what did their arrival mean for the future of humanity? The questions lingered unanswered as the Riftborn continued to multiply, their glowing forms casting an ethereal light on a world teetering between hope and fear. The next move was anyone's guess. In the aftermath of the Riftborn's arrival, the world was plunged into chaos. Nations, once rivals, now found themselves in a precarious race to understand the rift's purpose. Scientists, military leaders, and intelligence agencies were in a scramble to decode the alien presence, yet none of their methods brought clarity. The Riftborn, those glowing humanoid beings, remained a mystery, seemingly peaceful yet profoundly alien. They did not communicate with words, only through intense waves of emotion and thought, each encounter leaving those who met them with strange, fragmented visions, glimpses of distant futures, terrible catastrophes, and fleeting moments of unimaginable beauty. In Washington, D.C., General Monica Hayes stared down at a collection of new intelligence reports, the weight of responsibility pressing heavily on her shoulders. The Riftborn had made no aggressive moves, but they were not forthcoming with their intentions either. Most troubling was the report from the Pentagon. Military reconnaissance drones had been sent through the rift, but none returned. It was as if the very fabric of space-time inside the rift bent to some unknown will, trapping anything that entered it. But something far more troubling began to surface when Dr. Akira Tanaka, who had been tirelessly working on the anomaly since its inception, discovered something hidden within the vast quantities of data that had been collected. There was a pattern, one that was both impossible and yet undeniable. The rift was not just a tear in space, it was a doorway. But it wasn't just any doorway. The rift had a memory, an awareness. It seemed as though it had been waiting for someone, or something. Tanaka, in a state of exhaustion and panic, broke the news to General Hayes in a late-night meeting. This isn't random," he said, his voice hoarse. "The rift didn't appear by accident. It's connected to a very specific event in humanity's future, one that has yet to occur." Hayes frowned, uncertain of what Tanaka meant. "What are you suggesting?" "That the rift planned to open." Tanaka nodded grimly. "Not only that. The Riftborn are us, or at least they are humanity's future. I believe the rift is a conduit, a bridge through time, and the beings that are emerging are. They're us from a time long after our own. I think they've come back to change something, to prevent an irreversible disaster." Hayes' mind reeled. But why? What catastrophe could be so catastrophic that they would risk everything, including the fabric of reality itself, to come back and stop it? Tanaka paused, searching for the right words. "They haven't told us everything, but they're showing us fragments, glimpses of futures where humanity has destroyed itself. It's a future where all the technological advancements we've made, the wars, the environmental destruction, they all lead to the collapse of time itself. Humanity destroys the very fabric of the universe with its greed, its hubris." General Hayes' face hardened. "And they want us to stop that. That's why they've come," Tanaka said, voice barely above a whisper. "They're trying to undo something. Something we will do." But the most terrifying part of Tanaka's revelation came next. In his study of the rift, he had noticed a strange energy signature, a signature that wasn't just alien, but also human. The Riftborn were not simply descended from humanity's future. They had always been humanity's future. They were not just travelers from a far-off time. They were the inevitable result of humanity's choices. The rift, and the beings that emerged from it, were not accidents. They were the byproduct of a future already set in motion. As the two stared at each other in stunned silence, Tanaka's voice cracked. "And if we don't make the right choices, General, the timeline will unravel. Everything we know, everything we are, could be lost." The world had become a strange, fractured place. Ever since the Riftborn had stepped through the tear in the sky, society had been thrown into turmoil. Governments were paralyzed by fear, and global unrest reached a fever pitch. While many looked to the Riftborn for salvation, others saw them as an existential threat, an unstoppable force that had entered the world with motives unknown. But in the midst of this chaos, a new phenomenon began to emerge, one that no one had predicted: the Earth's children. At first, the changes were subtle. Individuals across the globe began experiencing strange sensations, vivid dreams of alien landscapes, flashes of distant stars, and feelings of power that they couldn't explain. Some reported hearing faint whispers in their ears. Others felt sudden surges of energy coursing through their bodies, like the hum of the universe itself. At first, it was written off as psychological stress, a collective symptom of the global panic that had gripped humanity. But then, things began to escalate. In Paris, an unassuming young woman named Isabelle Duran found herself standing in the middle of a crowded square when the world around her seemed to slow down. People continued walking, talking, and going about their day, but she could feel the rhythm of the universe around her, like a song she had always known but never heard. With a simple thought, she raised her hand, and the air around her shimmered. A streetlight flickered wildly, sparking and crackling before it bent toward her, obeying her will. She gasped, suddenly overwhelmed by the power within her. Isabel wasn't the only one. Across continents, similar events unfolded. In Johannesburg, a young man named Quame felt the earth beneath his feet shift and change at his command, as if he could hear its voice. In Tokyo, Seto realized he could read the thoughts of those around him with a clarity that felt unnatural. And in New York, Emma Calloway, a scientist with no belief in the supernatural, accidentally levitated a cup of coffee with nothing but her mind. Her shock reflected in the trembling hands that caught it before it could fall. The media exploded with the news. At first, there was disbelief, rumors of miracles, claims of divine intervention, and stories of people being chosen. But then, the scientific community couldn't ignore the data. These individuals, these new Earth's children, were not ordinary people. They were somehow linked to the Riftborn. Their powers, though erratic and uncontrolled, were undeniably connected to the strange energy that poured from the rift. The abilities they exhibited were far beyond anything humanity had known. As the Earth's children grew in number, some embraced their newfound gifts, while others struggled to control them. The Riftborn, having watched the awakening unfold, now began to intervene more directly. They spoke to the Earth's children, offering guidance in the form of cryptic visions and telepathic messages. They told the children that they were the key to humanity's survival, but the journey ahead would not be easy. They would have to choose whether to accept their place in the future or reject the path that had been set before them. Yet, not all Earth's children were so eager to embrace this destiny. As the powers within them grew, so did the fear of those who had not been chosen. In cities, small groups of resistance formed, claiming that these gifted individuals were a threat to humanity's autonomy. They feared the Earth's children might become a new ruling class, powered by abilities that could easily enslave or destroy those without them. A deep divide began to emerge. Those who accepted their new gifts as a sign of salvation, and those who feared that the Riftborn were simply using them as tools for their own grand design. And then the unthinkable happened. A faction of the Earth's children, led by a powerful young man named Daniel Cruz, declared that they would no longer bow to the will of the Riftborn. They would reject the future that had been forced upon them and forge their own destiny, one free of outside influence. This movement quickly gained momentum, as many of the children, driven by the same uncertainties and fears, joined the cause. The Riftborn, once perceived as saviors, were now viewed by some as oppressors, trying to manipulate the course of history. The world, once united in its terror of the Riftborn's arrival, was now fractured. Humanity was at a crossroads. Would they follow the Riftborn, becoming their inheritors in the future, or would they fight to remain masters of their own fate? The Earth's children were about to become the most dangerous weapon in the war for Earth's soul. The world had splintered into factions. On one side were the Earth's children, gifted with powers beyond comprehension and guided by the enigmatic Riftborn. On the other, there was the Resistance, a group of people, once united in fear, now bound by the belief that humanity must reclaim its future, free from the influence of beings they did not understand. The Riftborn, with their promises of salvation, had become the target of those who saw them not as saviors, but as conquerors. At the heart of the resistance stood Daniel Cruz, a young man whose abilities were unmatched. His power to manipulate energy had made him a symbol of defiance, an icon to those who rejected the Riftborn's vision of the future. Cruz, with his charisma and unwavering belief that humanity's future could not be dictated by outsiders, rallied millions to his cause. From Paris to Sao Paulo, from the deserts of Africa to the mountains of Asia, the resistance spread, their message clear. They would not allow the Riftborn to rewrite history, no matter the cost. Daniel's message was simple yet profound. We are the masters of our own fate. The Riftborn are a shadow of what we could become, if we choose to. His words resonated with people who had grown tired of being pawns in the Riftborn's grand design, People who had never asked for these powers, who feared the consequences of the Riftborn's unspoken agenda. Meanwhile, the Riftborn watched, observing the growing rebellion with an eerie calm. They did not intervene directly, but their influence was unmistakable. Earth's children who embraced the Riftborn's vision were drawn to their side. Some out of a sense of duty, others out of a desire for power. The Riftborn, in their silence, had created a rift not just in the sky, but within humanity itself. Those who aligned with them believed in the greater good, a future where Earth would be reborn, freed from the cycles of war, corruption, and destruction. Those who resisted believed that the price of such a future was far too high, that humanity would lose its soul in the process. As tensions escalated, the resistance became more organized. Former military leaders, politicians, and scientists, people who had once been in the service of their governments, now worked together in secret to form the Earthborn Resistance. They had access to old weapons, covert technology, and a vast network of sympathizers. The Resistance's strategy was to disrupt the Riftborn's influence by targeting the locations where the Earth's children were gathering, preventing them from being fully indoctrinated. They also sought to weaken the Riftborn's foothold by sabotaging the growing centers of power where the Riftborn were establishing their influence. One such operation was set to unfold in New York City, where a large assembly of Earth's children had gathered to witness the Riftborn unveil their final plan. Daniel Cruz and his most trusted followers were determined to stop it, knowing that if the Riftborn succeeded in uniting their followers under their banner, it would be the beginning of the end for their cause. As the Resistance prepared for their assault, Cruz stood before his team, his face grim but resolute. "This is it. We strike now, or we lose everything. If we let them continue their work, we'll never get another chance. We fight for our future, for humanity's future." His words ignited the fire of determination in every person who stood with him. They were ready, not just to fight for survival, but to fight for the very essence of what it meant to be human. At the same time, the Riftborn, though silent in their physical presence, communicated with their Earth's children. Through visions and psychic messages, they guided them to embrace their destiny. They showed them a glimpse of the new world they sought to create, a world where the scars of humanity's past had been healed, where corruption and conflict were distant memories. But these messages were not without their cost. The Earth's children who had accepted the Riftborn's gift found themselves torn between their loyalty to their human origins and the call to join something greater, something that could reshape the course of time itself. In the streets of New York, a battle was about to unfold that would decide the fate of the planet. Would humanity rise to claim its future, or would it fall under the rule of the Riftborn, rewriting the past to create a new and uncertain destiny? The world held its breath. The night before the decisive operation in New York, Daniel Cruz stood alone on the rooftop of an abandoned building, staring out at the city skyline. The tension in the air was palpable. He could feel it in the hum of the world beneath him. The rift, now a constant presence in the sky, cast a sickly glow across the horizon, reminding him of the stakes. This battle would not only decide the fate of New York, but of the world itself. He wasn't a man born for leadership, but the weight of the responsibility had shaped him into something he never expected. He had seen the fear in the eyes of the resistance fighters, the desperation in the hearts of those who felt powerless, but he had also seen the fire, the undeniable will to fight for a future that was still in their hands. They were more than just soldiers. They were the last line of defense for humanity's right to self-determination. The sounds of movement behind him broke his reverie. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Emma Calloway, one of the most powerful of the Earth's children, stepped forward, her eyes filled with an intensity that matched his own. The shimmering light in her gaze revealed the incredible power that lay dormant inside her, an untapped potential that had only recently begun to show itself. "You're thinking about tomorrow, aren't you?" she said softly, her voice steady. Daniel nodded, though his expression remained hard. "We have one chance to stop them. If we fail, if the Riftborn win, They'll rewrite everything. Humanity won't have a future anymore. Not one we can call our own. Emma stood beside him, the weight of her own powers making her feel both connected and apart from the world around her. And if we succeed, what then? Daniel looked over at her, his face etched with uncertainty. Then we have to figure out how to rebuild. We'll have to come together, unite humanity in a way we never have before, without the Riftborn's influence. Emma let out a slow breath, her mind swirling with doubts. She had always believed in the Riftborn's promise, that they were the key to ending humanity's self-destructive cycle. But as she spent more time with Daniel and the Resistance, she began to see the cracks in their vision. They weren't just trying to save humanity. They were trying to control it. "The Riftborn have shown me futures, Daniel," Emma said, her voice wavering slightly. "I've seen what could be, a world where war, famine, and destruction are no more, where humans can live in harmony with the earth." Daniel turned to face her, his expression intense. "And what if that future isn't ours to choose? What if they're taking away the very thing that makes us human, our freedom to choose our own path?" Emma's eyes faltered for a moment, as if she was struggling with the weight of his words. She had seen what the Riftborn had shown her, and part of her knew that the vision was undeniably appealing. But Daniel's words had struck a chord. Could they truly trust the Riftborn's promise, or were they simply pawns in a game they didn't understand? Before Emma could answer, a voice crackled in their earpieces. It was Kruz's voice, steady and commanding. "Everyone, the time has come. We move out. The operation begins at dawn." Without another word, Emma and Daniel exchanged a final glance before heading toward their team. They both knew the battle was upon them, and it would be the defining moment for humanity's future. At dawn, the Resistance fighters infiltrated New York's heart, a city now under the shadow of the Riftborn's growing influence. Buildings, once symbols of human achievement, now served as silent monuments to the world's changing fate. The Earth's children were gathering, awaiting the arrival of their Riftborn guides, unaware that the Resistance had planned to strike before they could carry out their next move. The battle began not with gunfire, but with the overwhelming force of energy. The Earth's children, sensing the approaching Resistance, began to use their abilities in defense. Emma, Daniel, and the others dove into the chaos, their powers clashing against the raw might of the Riftborn-influenced children. For every energy burst that hit its mark, another one was redirected with an unnatural speed. Buildings shook as the battle for control of the city escalated, and across the world, eyes watched in anticipation. The streets of New York became a war zone. In one corner, Daniel Kruz faced off with an Earthborn, a young man whose powers seemed to twist the fabric of reality itself. In another, Emma Calloway stood her ground, the air around her crackling with raw energy, as she tried to stop her former allies from engaging in a battle they couldn't understand. But as the battle raged on, a new force emerged from the shadows. The Riftborn themselves appeared, their forms glowing like living stars, watching as their creations fought one another. The Riftborn made no move to intervene. Instead, they silently observed the conflict, knowing that no matter the outcome, humanity was already at a turning point, one that could never be undone. The streets of New York had transformed into a battleground, one where the very essence of humanity's future was being decided. The Resistance fought valiantly against the Earth's children, who, though once allies, were now the front line for the Riftborn's vision of a reformed world. Energy blasts tore through the streets, shattering windows and toppling buildings, while the Earth's children used their powers to manipulate the environment, transforming it into a battlefield that seemed to obey their every will. Amidst the chaos, Daniel Kruz's thoughts were consumed by one question: how far are we willing to go? He had led his team into the heart of the conflict, intent on disrupting the Riftborn's plan. But with every passing moment, the situation seemed to spiral further out of control. The Resistance had expected to find a clear target, the Riftborn themselves, but they were nowhere to be found. Instead, it was the Earth's children who fought with desperate conviction, each one a weapon shaped by the Riftborn's influence, each one a testament to the power and potential of the strange beings from the rift. Daniel ducked behind the charred remnants of a building, narrowly avoiding a burst of energy that scorched the ground where he had just stood. His breath was heavy, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The resistance was losing ground. The Earth's children, though uncoordinated, were powerful beyond belief. They were each fighting not just for survival, but for a vision of the world they believed in, a future shaped by the Riftborn's unspoken promises. Emma Calloway was by his side, her eyes flashing with the energy of her own abilities. Her telekinetic powers surged as she held back a group of Earth's children attempting to overwhelm their position. "We can't keep this up much longer, Daniel," she shouted over the din of battle. "We need to find a way to stop them, before this turns into a full-scale war." "I know," Daniel replied, his voice strained, "but I'm starting to wonder if we're fighting the wrong battle." Emma shot him a confused glance. "What do you mean?" "We're so focused on stopping the Riftborn from controlling us. But what if we're just as blinded by our own ideals?" Daniel's voice was low, almost to himself. "I don't know anymore, Emma. I don't know what the right choice is." For a moment, there was a pause in the battle around them. Emma stood still, her mind racing. She had always believed that the Riftborn's vision for humanity was a lie, that they were simply a means of control, an alien influence that sought to overwrite human history. But Daniel's words struck a chord. What if the Riftborn weren't the enemy at all? What if humanity's refusal to accept their influence was the true source of conflict? Suddenly, a deep, resonant hum filled the air. The Riftborn themselves had arrived, silent, ethereal, and all-encompassing. They hovered above the battlefield, their forms shimmering like living constellations. Their presence caused an almost unnatural stillness, as though the world had held its breath. The Earth's children froze. The resistance, too, stopped in their tracks. For a moment, there was no movement, no more fighting. Just the immense power of the Riftborn, as if they were waiting for something to unfold. Daniel clenched his fists, feeling a surge of power wash over him. "They're giving us a choice," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "This is what they've been waiting for." A ripple of telepathic energy pulsed through the battlefield as the Riftborn reached out to the Earth's children, to the resistance, and to every soul within range. Their voices, both alien and familiar, merged into a collective message, one that echoed inside the minds of those who listened. "This is the turning point," they spoke, their voices like an ancient wind, carrying the weight of timeless knowledge. "You must choose now. The future you envision will either be shaped by the freedom of your will or the certainty of our guidance. Both paths lead to a new world, but only one will be yours to command." Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. The Riftborn were offering them a choice to either accept their vision for the future or to reject it entirely. But what did that really mean? Could humanity truly build a future on its own, free of the Riftborn's influence, or would their rebellion only lead to an even darker fate? Emma stepped forward, her eyes locked on the glowing forms of the Riftborn. "What are you asking of us?" she called out, her voice shaking with emotion. "Are you telling us we must choose between your future and our own? Is that the only choice we have?" The Riftborn's response was not spoken, but felt, a wave of understanding that washed over her. The message was clear. You do not have to choose this future. You must create it yourselves. But to do so, you must first understand the cost of both paths. It was a question with no easy answer. Daniel's thoughts raced. This was not just a battle of physical might. It was a battle of ideals, of belief. The Riftborn had come to offer humanity the ultimate choice, but the cost of that choice remained hidden. What would happen if they rejected the Riftborn's guidance? And if they accepted, what would it mean for the soul of humanity? As the tension mounted, Daniel and Emma faced the greatest question of all. Would they trust themselves to make the right choice? The air was thick with tension. The Riftborn hovered above the battlefield, their ethereal forms radiating an otherworldly glow, casting long shadows across the war-torn streets of New York. All around them, the Earth's children and the Resistance paused, locked in an uneasy stillness. The words of the Riftborn had reached every mind, their message clear. A choice must be made. The future is yours to create, but the cost will be revealed. Daniel Kruse stood at the center of the conflict, his fists clenched, his mind racing. The battle had stopped, but the war within him was just beginning. The Riftborn had given them a choice: submit to their guidance and join them in creating a new world, or reject them and risk destroying the very future they had hoped to build. It was a question that no one had prepared for, and the weight of it pressed down on every soul present. Emma Calloway, standing beside him, gazed up at the Riftborn, her expression a mix of wonder and fear. She had always believed that the Riftborn were a threat, that their intervention would strip humanity of its freedom, its essence. But now, as she felt the deep pull of their presence, something in her hesitated. The vision they offered was beautiful, a world free of war and suffering, where humanity would live in harmony with itself and the Earth. But at what cost? "We're not ready for this," Daniel muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. "We can't just hand over our future." Emma turned to him, her eyes reflecting the same uncertainty that churned in his gut. "But are we ready to fight against it? What if we're wrong? What if rejecting them means we destroy everything?" Daniel met her gaze, feeling the weight of her words settle like a stone in his chest. The idea of rejecting the Riftborn's vision, of choosing an uncertain future without their guidance, was terrifying. But the alternative, becoming a tool for their grand design, felt like the death of everything they had fought for. Is freedom worth the cost of chaos? He thought. Can we truly decide our own fate, or are we just destined to repeat the same mistakes? The silence stretched on, broken only by the distant sound of explosions and the crackling of energy in the air. The battle was over for now, but the war for humanity's soul had just begun. Every person present felt the gravity of the moment, as if the very fabric of time itself was holding its breath. Then, the Riftborn spoke again, their voices a chorus that resonated deep within the hearts of all who could hear. "This choice is not ours to make, but yours. We offer the path, but you must walk it. Will you join us, or will you turn away? You will find what you seek on either path. But know this: one choice will lead to unity, the other to fragmentation." Daniel's mind was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. He thought of the Resistance fighters, brave men and women who had chosen to stand against the Riftborn, who believed that humanity could rise above the influence of any external force. He thought of the Earth's children, those who had embraced their new powers, who saw the Riftborn as saviors, offering a chance at a future without war, without hunger, without suffering. But most of all, he thought of the people, the everyday humans who had no powers, who had no stake in this cosmic battle, but who would bear the consequences of whatever decision was made. They had their own vision for the future, one where humanity could thrive on its own terms, freed from the influence of any other being. "We can't be slaves to anyone," Daniel said, his voice firm. "Not the Riftborn, not anyone." Emma nodded slowly, the uncertainty in her eyes giving way to resolve. "Then we make our own future. We fight for it. Together." With those words, Daniel made his decision. He turned toward the gathered Resistance fighters, their faces marked with exhaustion, but still burning with determination. "It's time to stand up," he said, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "We're not going to let anyone decide our future for us. Not the Riftborn, not anyone. This is our world, and we will fight for it." The words echoed like a rallying cry, and a wave of energy surged through the Resistance. Their powers, their convictions, their will to create their own destiny, all came together in that moment. The Earth's children stood in silence, watching the defiant movement of humanity. Some still hesitated, torn between the call of the Riftborn's vision and the power they felt in their hearts. But one by one, they began to lower their weapons, to reconsider their allegiance. The Riftborn had given them a choice, but now it was clear. This was a battle for the heart and soul of humanity. As the Riftborn observed the unfolding scene, they offered no further words, no promises, no ultimatums. Their presence lingered in the air, heavy with the weight of the decision that had been made. And as the sun began to rise over the horizon, casting light on the shattered streets, Daniel Kruz stood at the forefront, leading the charge. The battle was not over, but humanity had taken the first step toward its future, one it would forge itself. The Riftborn watched, waiting for what came next.